The dim glow of lanterns hung like suspended fireflies over the private dining room of Sakura no Hana, a discreet izakaya tucked into the labyrinthine alleys of Tokyo's Ginza district. Rain pattered against the shoji screens, a relentless rhythm that muffled the distant hum of the city, taxis splashing through puddles, salarymen laughing from nearby bars. Inside, the air carried the sharp tang of sake warmed over coals, and the earthy steam of simmering miso, but for Hiroshi Kato, the scents barely registered. He sat at the low, lacquered table, his broad shoulders straining against the tailored black suit, tattoos hidden beneath crisp cuffs, a subtle nod to the ink that marked him as Oyabun of the Kato Gumi, one of Tokyo's most shadowed syndicates. Across from him, his grandmother Ji-Yun sipped her green tea with the quiet authority of someone who had outlived empires. At 82, her Korean roots showed in the sharp angles of her face and the way she folded her hands, a habit from her days smuggling messages across borders during the war. Hiroshi had brought her here for her birthday, a rare concession to sentiment in his iron-clad world. Family was the one code he never bent: protect the bloodline, honor the elders no matter the cost. His late wife, Aiko, had embodied that, gentle, fierce, gone too soon in an accident that still gnawed at him 5 years later. A rival's car bomb, the police called it. Sloppy, he knew. His enemies were rarely that careless. Ji-Yun set her cup down, her eyes, still keen as a hawk's, scanning the room. The waitress moved like a shadow among the other patrons, her steps efficient, her black uniform blending with the low light. She was young, mid-20s, with long dark hair tied in a neat ponytail and features that evoked the soft elegance of old ukiyo-e prints. As she approached their table to refill the sake, Ji-Yun's hand shot out, pointing with a trembling finger. "Hiroshi," she whispered in Korean, her voice cutting through the murmur like a blade. "That girl. She looks exactly like your Aiko. The same eyes, the same smile. It's her ghost returned." Hiroshi's chopsticks froze midway to his mouth. He turned slowly, his gaze locking onto the waitress. Sumin Park, her name tag read, a detail he'd glanced at earlier without interest. But now, in the flicker of the lantern, her profile hit him like a suppressed memory unlocked. The high cheekbones, the subtle tilt of her head when she bowed. Aiko had tilted just like that, serving him tea in their old apartment before the world had claimed her. His face drained of color, the scar along his jaw tightening as blood rushed from his cheeks. He set the chopsticks down with deliberate calm, but his mind raced. Coincidence? In his line of work, coincidences were setups, traps laid by informants or worse, rival clans sniffing for weakness. Sumin paused, sensing the shift in the air. She was used to the izakaya's regulars, businessmen sealing deals, tourists chasing authenticity. But this table felt different, heavy like the pressure before a storm. The old woman stared at her with an intensity that made Sumin's skin prickle, and the man. His eyes were dark pools, assessing her as if she were a ledger entry. "More sake, sir?" she asked in polished Japanese, her accent faint but present, a remnant of her Korean immigrant parents who had settled in Yokohama after the divorce that shattered their family. Hiroshi nodded once, his voice low and measured. "Yes, and tell me, have you worked here long?" It was an innocuous question, but the way his gaze lingered carried weight, probing for cracks in her story. Sumin poured carefully, the liquid glinting amber. 6 months. It's steady work. She kept it brief. Prying eyes were common in Ginza, where deals whispered in corners could topple fortunes. But as she straightened, Ji-Eun reached out, grasping her wrist with surprising strength. "Child, where are you from? Your face, it's like seeing the past walk in." The touch was warm, insistent, and Sumin pulled back gently, a polite smile masking her unease. I'm Korean-Japanese, ma'am, from Yokohama. She excused herself quickly, retreating to the kitchen pass-through, her heart thudding. Who were they? The old woman spoke Korean like her own mother, and the man's suit screamed money, old dangerous money. She wiped her hands on her apron, glancing back. He hadn't moved, but his posture had shifted, alert, like a predator scenting the wind. In the dining room, Hiroshi leaned toward Ji-un, switching to Japanese. "Oba-san, it's impossible. Aiko is gone." But doubt crept in, a sliver under his armor. His wife had been 28 when she died, vibrant and loyal, the only one who'd ever made him question the life. If this girl was a plant, some Yakuza ploy to unsettle him, it was brilliant. The Inagawa Kai had been pushing boundaries lately, encroaching on his shipping routes along the Sumida River. A ghost from his past could fracture alliances, make him slip. Ji-un shook her head, her silver hairpins glinting. Not impossible. Fate doesn't lie. Talk to her, Hiroshi, before the shadows do. She knew his world better than most. She'd buried her own husband to it, a smuggler caught in the crossfire of post-war syndicates. Loyalty was her creed too, blood and vows above all. Hiroshi signaled for the check, his mind already mapping contingencies. He'd have his men run her name, Sumin Park, check immigration records, work history. If she was clean, perhaps a coincidence worth exploring. If not, the code demanded caution. As the waitress returned with the bill, he stood towering over her at 6'2". "Miss Park," he said, slipping a generous tip into the folder, enough to buy questions. "My grandmother insists you join us for tea tomorrow, private room noon. She won't take no for an answer." Sumin blinked, caught off guard. Gratitude, curiosity, or the subtle threat in his tone, the way his security, two men in ill-fitting suits at the bar, had straightened. I have a shift," she stammered, but his eyes held hers, unyielding. "Rearrange it. For family." He turned away, Ji-un's hand on his arm, leaving Sumin staring at the door as it slid shut behind them. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming on the awning like warning shots. She didn't know it yet, but in accepting or refusing, she'd stepped into a current that could pull her under. And in the shadows across the street, a figure in a hooded coat noted the exchange, phone already dialing a number that would ripple through the underworld. Who had sent the watcher, and what debt from Hiroshi's past had just resurfaced? The morning sun filtered through the grimy blinds of Sumin's cramped apartment in Asakusa, casting striped shadows across the tatami mats, worn thin from years of solitary footsteps. She sat at her low kotatsu table, nursing a cup of instant coffee that tasted more of regret than comfort. The tip from last night, 20,000 yen folded neatly into the bill, sat like a stone in her pocket. Enough to cover rent and her mother's hospital bills for a month, but it wasn't the money that kept her awake. It was the man's eyes, dark and unreadable, promising answers or oblivion. Who was he? The old woman had spoken Korean with the cadence of her own grandmother's stories, tales of divided families and borders crossed in desperation, and the resemblance they saw. It unnerved her. Sumin had no family secrets worth hiding, just a life pieced together from part-time shifts and the ache of watching her mother fade in a Yokohama ward, tubes snaking like accusations. She glanced at her phone. 10:45 a.m. The izakaya manager had grumbled but approved the shift swap when she mentioned a family emergency. Lies came easy in a city that devoured truths. Curiosity won out over caution. Perhaps the tea would explain the stare, or at least yield more cash. She dressed simply, a navy sweater over jeans, her hair loose for once, framing her face like a shield. As she stepped into the bustling street, the air hummed with the chatter of tourists and the sizzle of street vendors frying takoyaki. But Sumin felt watched. a prickle at her neck, as if the alley cats had eyes too sharp. She shook it off, hailing a taxi to the address scribbled on the note, a tea house in Roppongi, upscale and shadowed by gleaming skyscrapers. The cab wound through Tokyo's veins, neon signs flickering even in daylight, the distant rumble of the Yamanote line underscoring the city's pulse. Sumin's mind raced ahead. What if they were connected to her parents' old life? Her father had vanished after the divorce, whispers of gambling debts trailing him like smoke. She paid the driver and stepped out onto the polished sidewalk, the tea house's facade a serene contrast. Red Tory lanterns swaying gently, the scent of jasmine tea wafting from open doors. Two men in dark suits flanked the entrance, their postures too rigid for mere bouncers, earpieces glinting, eyes scanning the crowd with predatory efficiency. One nodded her through without a word, as if her face were already on a list. Inside, the private room was a cocoon of luxury. Silk screens partitioning the space, a low table laden with porcelain cups steaming with matcha. Ji-eun sat cross-legged, her kimono embroidered with cranes that seemed to take flight in the soft light. Hiroshi loomed beside her, his presence filling the room like low thunder, the faint outline of a holster beneath his jacket a silent warning. No bodyguards visible, but Sumin sensed them, perhaps behind the screens, radios humming faintly like distant bees. "Miss Park," Hiroshi said, his voice a gravelly baritone, gesturing to the cushion opposite. "You came?" "Good." He poured the tea himself, the liquid's green hue swirling like secrets in the bowl. Ji-eun smiled, her eyes lighting with warmth that belied the steel beneath. Sumin knelt, bowing slightly, her pulse quickening at the formality. "I didn't want to worry your grandmother," she replied, accepting the cup. The matcha was bitter, grounding, but the air carried an undercurrent, polished wood mingled with the metallic tang of concealed tension. "Why me?" "The resemblance. It's kind, but I've heard it before. People see what they want." Ji-eun leaned forward, her veined hands clasping Sumin's briefly. "Not kindness, child, truth. Aiko, my grandson's wife, had your eyes, the way they crinkle when you doubt. She was taken 5 years ago. A car on the expressway, they said, but accidents in our world." She trailed off, switching to Korean, her words a murmur meant for Sumin alone. "Shadows follow blood. You remind me of her strength, the quiet fire." Hiroshi's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching like a warning flare. He watched Sumin with an intensity that bordered on possession, as if mapping her features against a ghost. "My grandmother sees omens in faces, but coincidences interest me." He slid a small envelope across the table, another tip, thicker this time. "For your time and questions, family in Korea, ties to Yokohama syndicates." The probe landed like a hook. Sumin's fingers paused on the envelope, the paper crisp against her skin. "Just my mother. Ill in the hospital. No syndicates, my father's gone, debts or whatever. I wait tables to survive." But as she spoke, a flicker caught her eye. Hiroshi's phone, screen lighting briefly on the table. A message? The preview vanished too fast. Something about "Park verification clean, but tail spotted on Sumida." Her stomach knotted. Tail. Was that about her? Ji-eun chuckled softly, breaking the moment. "See Hiroshi. No shadows in her. Invite her to the house. Let her meet the life." But Hiroshi's gaze sharpened, shifting to the screen door as if hearing a ghost. Outside, the street noise swelled, a car horn blaring too close, tires hissing on wet pavement from an earlier drizzle. One of the suits from the entrance appeared, whispering urgently in Hiroshi's ear. The Oyabun's face hardened, a subtle nod sending the man away. "Trouble?" Sumin asked, voice steady despite the chill racing her spine. The room felt smaller, the air thicker with unspoken logistics. Guard rotations, perhaps, or a burner phone's ping alerting to surveillance. Hiroshi stood abruptly, his shadow engulfing her. "Nothing you need fear, yet." He extended a hand, pulling her up with surprising gentleness, his grip firm, possessive. "Come, my driver will take you home, but tomorrow, dinner at the estate, to discuss protection." The word hung, laced with implication. From what? His world, or the one closing in? Sumin nodded, pulse thundering, the envelope burning in her pocket. As they stepped into the lobby, she glimpsed her reflection in a mirrored wall, eyes wide, echoing the ghost they saw. The driver waited, a black sedan idling curbside, exhaust curling like smoke signals. But as she slid into the leather seat, the scent of new polish masking faint cigarette smoke, she noticed the rearview mirror, the driver's eyes flicking not just to traffic, but to shadows trailing 2 cars back. A white van, unremarkable, but lingering too long at the light. Who was following, and what had Hiroshi's past unearthed in her ordinary life? The black sedan glided through Roppongi's glittering arteries, the midday traffic a snarl of luxury coupes and delivery bikes weaving like schools of fish. Sumin sat in the back, her fingers tracing the envelope's edge in her lap, the paper crinkling softly against the leather upholstery. The driver's cologne, sandalwood, and something sharper like gun oil clung to the air, mingling with the faint ozone scent of the city's perpetual humidity. She stole glances in the side mirror, the white van still there, 2 vehicles back, its driver obscured by tinted windows. Coincidence? In Tokyo's gridlock, maybe. But the way it matched their speed at every turn felt deliberate, a shadow stitched to their wake. "Busy streets today," she said lightly, testing the waters. The driver, mid-40s, crew cut, a faint scar bisecting his eyebrow, met her eyes in the rear view for a split second. "Always are, miss. Boss likes efficiency." His Japanese was clipped, laced with the gravel of someone who'd smoked too many nights on stakeouts. No name, no elaboration. Sumin leaned back, her mind churning. "Protection," he'd said. From what? Her ordinary life? Shifts at the izakaya, hospital visits via crowded trains, had no room for tales or bosses with estates. Yet here she was, ensnared by a ghost she didn't know. The sedan turned onto the Shuto Expressway, elevated lanes humming with the growl of engines and the distant wail of an ambulance slicing through. Below, the Sumida River churned grey under sodium lights, its banks lined with warehouses that squatted like forgotten sentinels. Perfect for discreet shipments, Sumin realized with a jolt. Her father's debts had whispered of such places, crates unloaded under cover of fog, rival crews clashing over territory. She pushed the thought down. That was his shadow, not hers. A sudden swerve yanked her forward. The van had accelerated, cutting across lanes to close the gap. The driver cursed under his breath, his hand dropping to the gear shift as he punched the accelerator. Tires hissed on rain-slicked asphalt, the sedan surging ahead, weaving past a lumbering truck. Sumin's heart slammed against her ribs, the envelope slipping to the floor. "What's happening?" she demanded, gripping the door handle. "Tail!" he grunted, eyes flicking between mirrors. His free hand tapped the dashboard, a concealed button, perhaps summoning backup via some encrypted radio. The van mirrored them, relentless, its horn blaring as it bullied through. In the chaos, Sumin spotted a motorcycle peeling from a side ramp, black helmet gleaming, slotting in behind the van like a predator joining the hunt. More trouble? Or Hiroshi's countermeasures? The driver veered onto an exit ramp toward Asakusa, the ancient temple district unfolding in a blur of pagoda roofs and throngs of visitors snapping photos under cherry blossom stubs. The sedan dove into narrower streets, the engine's roar echoing off stone walls, etched with centuries of secrets. Sumin's phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from an unknown number. "Stay low. Extraction en route. H." Hiroshi. How had he gotten her digits? The izakaya's roster, probably. Nothing a man like him couldn't access with a quiet word to the right contacts. They burst onto a side alley, the van too bulky to follow, scraping fenders as it braked hard. The motorcycle shot past, vanishing around a corner with a rev that rattled windows. The sedan slowed, pulling into a shadowed lot behind a nondescript noodle shop. Steam from boiling broth curling out like smoke signals. The driver killed the engine, scanning the mirrors. Clear for now. Walk the rest. No cabs. Boss's orders. Su-min stepped out, legs unsteady on the uneven pavement, the alley's damp chill seeping through her sweater. The air smelled of soy and rain-soaked concrete, a far cry from the tea house's jasmine. Who were they? Why me? He lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating a face carved by loyalty's toll. Inagawa Kai, likely, encroaching on the river runs. You're a complication now. He exhaled, smoke twisting upward. Dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. Black car picks you up. Don't be late. No threat, just fact. The code of his world, where questions yielded to action. She nodded, pocketing her phone, and slipped into the pedestrian flow toward her apartment. The crowd buffered her, tourists chattering in fractured English, vendors hawking amulets that promised luck she didn't feel. But the prickle returned, sharper now. Eyes from a cafe window, a figure lingering by a vending machine too long. Paranoia or the web tightening? By the time she reached her building, a faded concrete stack with flickering fluorescence in the stairwell, sweat beaded her brow despite the cool air. She locked the door, double-checking the chain, and sank onto the futon. The room's single bulb casting long shadows across faded family photos. Her mother young and smiling, before the illness. Her father, a ghost even then. Her phone rang. The hospital. Miss Park? Your mother's stable, but bills are piling. Any update on payments? Sumin's throat tightened. The envelope's weight pulled her to the table. She counted the bills. 50,000 yen. Enough for another round of treatments. Gratitude warred with fear. Hiroshi's protection dangled like a lure. But at what cost to her autonomy? She texted back to the unknown number. Who are you really, and why the chase? The reply came swift. Someone who sees value in echoes of the past. Trust the code. Family first. See you tomorrow. Attached was a photo, not of her, but a grainy shot of the white van. License plate blurred but time-stamped minutes ago. Surveillance on surveillance. Hiroshi's reach extended like roots under the city, logistics of cameras and informants weaving a net. As dusk fell, painting the room in bruised purples, Sumin paced, the floorboards creaking under her steps. Dinner at the estate meant stepping deeper, restricted gates, guard rotations she could only imagine, ledgers of debts and alliances hidden in safe rooms. Her ethics screamed caution. She was no pawn in Yakuza games, no substitute for a dead wife. Yet the pull was there. Curiosity about the resemblance, the aid for her mother, the magnetic pull of Hiroshi's restrained power, his vow to shield what he claimed. A knock echoed, soft, insistent. She froze, peering through the peephole, a delivery boy, envelope in hand. For Sumin Park. She cracked the door, signing quickly. Inside, a burner phone, simple and black, with one message preloaded. For emergencies. Press 1 for extraction. No sender, but the implication clear. Hiroshi's code wrapping around her like invisible ink. She set it down, staring at the river view from her tiny window, lights twinkling on the water like distant warnings. The Inagawa Kai's tale meant real stakes, rival factions testing borders, perhaps using her as bait to draw out weaknesses in Katogumi's shipping manifests. But what grudge tied her to it? An old ledger entry from her father's debts, resurfacing like driftwood. Outside, a car engine idled briefly before fading into the night. Was it backup, or the shadows closing in? And would tomorrow's dinner seal her fate or forge an unlikely alliance? If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The evening air in Asakusa hung heavy with the scent of sizzling yakitori from street carts, mingling with the faint, acrid tang of exhaust from idling engines. Sumin stood at her apartment window, the burner's screen casting a cold blue glow on her face as she debated smashing it. But the photo of the van lingered in her mind, a digital breadcrumb leading back to Hiroshi's shadowed empire. "Family first," his message had said. Her mother's labored breaths over the phone that afternoon echoed it. Another bill, another plea. Autonomy felt like a luxury she couldn't afford, not when treatments dangled just beyond reach. She pocketed the device, slipping into a simple black dress that hugged her frame without pretense, her hair pinned back to expose the vulnerable line of her neck. At 6:50 p.m., the black sedan arrived precisely, its tinted windows reflecting the neon haze like obsidian mirrors. The driver from yesterday nodded curtly, holding the door without a word. No scar visible this time. A different man, younger, with a tattoo peeking from his collar. Irizumi waves crashing silently. "Estates in the hills. Direct route." His voice was flat, but his eyes darted to the mirrors as they pulled away, the engine purring low like a contained threat. Sumin settled into the leather, the seat's cool embrace contrasting the knot in her stomach. The city blurred past, salarymen spilling from izakayas, the Sumida's dark ribbons snaking below overpasses, lined with security cameras that whirred faintly, their lenses tracking more than traffic. She wondered if Hiroshi's men monitored them too, access codes feeding into discrete ledgers, guard rotations synced to the minute. The route climbed into the wooded outskirts of Tokyo, away from the urban sprawl toward the affluent enclave of Setagaya. Streetlights thinned, replaced by the sodium glow of private gates, estates hidden behind manicured hedges and motion sensor floods. The sedan slowed at a wrought iron barrier, its crest a stylized koi, Katogumi's mark, subtle but unmistakable to those in the know. A guard emerged from the booth, scanning the undercarriage with a handheld device, the beep cutting the night's chorus of crickets. "Clear," he murmured into a radio, the static hiss swallowed by the engine's idle. The gates parted with a hydraulic whisper, revealing a winding drive flanked by cherry trees, their branches skeletal against the moonlit sky. The estate loomed like a fortress disguised as elegance, low-slung roofs tiled in slate, walls of weathered stone blending with the hillside. Lanterns dotted the gravel path, casting pools of amber that danced on dew-kissed leaves. Sumin's pulse quickened as they parked near the entrance, where two figures waited, Hiroshi, impeccable in a charcoal yukata that accentuated his broad frame, and Ji-Yun, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes bright with anticipation. No overt security in sight, but the air hummed with it, distant generators thrumming underground, the faint click of perimeter sensors. "Miss Park," Hiroshi greeted, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the gravel. He offered his arm, a gesture both chivalrous and commanding, his skin warm against hers despite the chill. "You honor us." Up close, the scar on his jaw caught the light, a jagged reminder of battles unspoken. Ji-Un clasped Sumin's free hand, her grip frail but insistent. "Come, child. The table waits, and so do the stories." They entered through sliding Fusuma doors into a genkan polished to a mirror sheen, the air inside rich with cedar and the subtle smoke of incense. Servants, silent, efficient, took cloaks and shoes, their movements a choreographed ballet born of rigid protocol. The dining hall unfolded like a scene from an old scroll. Tatami mats underfoot, a long ebony table laden with kaiseki dishes, steaming bamboo shoots, sashimi glistening like river pearls, sake warmed in clay pots. But the opulence carried undercurrents. Reinforced walls disguised as shoji, A faint electronic buzz from hidden panels. Hiroshi guided her to a cushion beside his, the proximity electric, his knee brushing hers as they knelt. Ji-yoon raised her cup first, the porcelain clinking softly, to echoes that return. Her words were light, but her gaze pierced, probing Sumin's features as if decoding a cipher. Hiroshi poured for them all, his hands steady, but Sumin caught the subtle tell, a vein pulsing at his temple, betraying the calm. "My grandmother believes in signs," he said, his tone measured. "Aiko. She loved this place. The garden at night, fireflies like stars." He paused, eyes distant, then refocused on Sumin. "You remind me why I protect it, the riverside runs, shipping manifests that keep rivals at bay. But lately, discrepancies, a ledger entry from years back, tied to a name like yours." Sumin's fork paused mid-air, the shrimp's briny scent turning sour in her throat. "Park? My father's old debts, maybe. He vanished after Yokohama. Gambling, they said, but I'm no part of that." The words tumbled out, laced with defensiveness, her independence clashing against the web of his world. Yet curiosity tugged. What if her ordinary life intersected his shadows? A burner phone in her pocket vibrated once, silent alert. She ignored it, but Hiroshi's eyes narrowed as if sensing the shift. Ji-yoon leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper in Korean. "Blood calls to blood." Aiko had a locket hidden, inside a photo from Korea, family ties severed by war. "You wear no such thing but the face." She trailed off as a servant approached, bowing low. "Oyabun, the outer patrol reports a glitch. Camera on the east gate, feed looping." Hiroshi's posture stiffened imperceptibly, a coded gesture rippling through the room. The servant retreated, but not before Sumin glimpsed his earpiece, relaying to unseen watchers. "Tell me about your mother," Hiroshi pressed, diverting smoothly. Though his free hand rested near his side, holster's outline faint under silk. "The hospital. I can arrange care. Discreet." The offer hung, possessive yet protective, testing her loyalty against fear. Sumin met his gaze, the pull undeniable. His code, vows unbroken even in loss, mirroring her own fierce devotion to family. "She's all I have," she admitted, voice steady. "No strings." But as she spoke, the lights flickered. A brief blackout, the garden plunging into inky void before generators kicked in with a distant growl. Outside, gravel crunched under hurried feet, a false alarm or infiltration. Hiroshi rose fluidly, signaling the meal's end. "Walk with me." He led her to the veranda, the night air crisp with pine and river mist rising from the valley below. Ji-yoon followed at a distance, her silhouette watchful. The garden stretched shadowed, koi ponds rippling under lanterns, but Sumin's skin prickled. Behavioral tells from the servants, glances too lingering, as if guard rotations had shifted on a whisper. "The Inagawa Kai pushes," Hiroshi murmured, his breath warm near her ear. "Trails on my shipments, intercepted texts from burner phones, your arrival. It stirs old grievances. A debt ledger resurfaced, your father's name inked beside arrivals." His hand grazed her arm, possessive, yet his eyes searched hers for trust, autonomy yielding to the bond forming in the tension. A soft chime echoed from the house. Radio static, perhaps, or an access code failing. Sumin turned, spotting a figure at the garden's edge. One of the guards, phone to ear, gesturing urgently. Hiroshi's face hardened, the scar whitening. "Stay close." But as they moved inside, the burner's vibration returned, insistent. She slipped it out under cover of shadow, a message from an unknown sender, not Hiroshi's line. "She's the key, extract at dawn. K. Whose initials were I? K. And how deep had the rivals burrowed into the estate's guarded heart? The veranda's wooden planks creaked under Hiroshi's measured steps, the night air thick with the earthy musk of damp moss and the distant murmur of the Sumida River carving its way through the valley. Su-min followed close, her black dress whispering against her legs, the burner's message searing in her mind like a brand. She's the key. Extract at dawn. I.K. Who was I? K? A rival's code name, perhaps, initials etched into some shadowed ledger of betrayals. Her pulse thrummed in sync with the generator's low hum, now steady after the flicker, but the estate felt alive with unseen currents, cameras whirring softly in the eaves, their red lights pulsing like watchful eyes. Hiroshi paused at the Fusuma doors, his broad back a barrier against the garden's encroaching dark. The guard from the edge approached swiftly, his face a mask of controlled urgency, earpiece coiled like a serpent around his neck. He bowed low, voice a hushed rasp. Oyabun, the East Gate camera, it's not a glitch. Feed's been looped manually. Someone bypassed the access code, likely from inside the perimeter. Hiroshi's hand tightened on the doorframe, knuckles whitening, but his expression remained granite. Years of enforcing the code had honed that restraint. No panic, only calculation. Rotation check, double the patrols, and pull the manifests from the river docks. Cross-reference any Inagawa Kai plates in the last week. The guard nodded, vanishing into the house with a faint radio crackle trailing him. Sumin's breath caught. The words painted a picture of logistics she'd only glimpsed in her father's old stories. Shipping crates loaded under fog-shrouded cranes, guards timing shifts to evade rival scouts. But this was real, infiltrating Hiroshi's sanctum, and she was the key in their cipher. Autonomy clashed against the fear coiling in her gut. She could bolt now, vanish into Tokyo's veins. But the pull of his world, and the aid for her mother, anchored her. Hiroshi, she said softly, using his name for the first time, testing the intimacy. That message on my phone, it's not from you. Someone wants me out at dawn. He turned, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that bordered on possession, the scar along his jaw catching the lantern's glow like a fault line. Show me. She handed over the burner, their fingers brushing, his calloused from grips on steering wheels, and worse, hers trembling slightly. He scanned the screen, jaw clenching as he pocketed it. I.K. Inagawa Kai's underboss. Ichiro Kato. No relation, thank the ancestors. He's been sniffing my roots, old grudge from a dock deal gone south 5 years back. The year Aiko. He trailed off, the name a ghost between them, loyalty to her memory fueling his vigilance. They think you're leverage. A face like hers stirs weaknesses, but you're no pawn, Sumin. Not to me. Jian appeared in the doorway. Her shawl draped like armor, eyes sharp despite the late hour. The house stirs like a hive. Bring her to the safe room, Hiroshi. No more gardens tonight. Her Korean lilt carried authority, a grandmother's code mirroring his own. Protect the blood, even if it meant adopted echoes. Hiroshi nodded, guiding Sumin inside with a hand at the small of her back, possessive yet protective. His touch, a silent vow against the encroaching threat. The corridors unfolded, like a labyrinth of polished oak and rice paper walls, lit by recessed LEDs that cast long shadows dancing like informants in the half-light. Distant sounds filtered through, the clack of boots on gravel outside, a muffled conversation in Japanese about compromised burner logs. Hiroshi led them to a concealed panel behind a scroll painting, a simple pressure plate disguised as an ink brush. It slid open with a pneumatic sigh, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into the estate's underbelly. The air grew cooler, laced with the sterile tang of concrete and the faint ozone of backup systems. "Built after Aiko," he explained, voice echoing off the walls. "No windows." Reinforced, "If they breach, we hold." Sumin descended beside him, the steps uneven underfoot, her mind racing through clues. The looped camera, IK's message, Had a turncoat in the guard rotation fed them the access code? Or was it human error, a subtle behavioral tell like the servant's lingering glance at dinner? Loyalty versus fear gnawed at her. Hiroshi's world demanded the former, but her independence rebelled at being shuttled like cargo. "You can't keep me here," she said, voice steady in the dimness. "I'm not Aiko. I have a life. My mother, the hospital, this protection. It's a cage, if it's forced." He stopped at the bottom, facing her in the glow of emergency strips lining the hall. The safe room door loomed, steel-clad with a biometric lock, his thumbprint beeping approval as it unsealed. "Not a cage, a shield. The code I live by. Never let innocence pay for old debts. Your father's name in that ledger? It's tied to Ichiro's crew. Unpaid shipments from Yokohama. They see you as payback, but with me, you're safe. Choose it, Sumin. Trust over suspicion." His words hung. Ambition for alliance clashing with her prudence, the push-pull electric in the confined space. Inside, the room was Spartan luxury. A low table with water carafes, a wall screen flickering to life with estate feeds, cameras showing patrols sweeping the grounds, floodlights sweeping empty paths. Gion settled on a cushion, pouring water with hands that belied her age. "Sit, child. Dawn's hours away. Tell us of your mother. Perhaps ties we can untangle." But as Sumin knelt, the screen glitched, a feed from the docks cutting in unbidden grainy footage of a white van idling by the river, license plate matching the tail from yesterday. Then static, and a voice crackled through hidden speakers. "Oyabun, infiltrated warehouse. Manifests tampered. Inagawa Kai diversions en route. Storms rolling in. Blackout risk high." Hiroshi's face paled under the fluorescent hum, not from fear, but the weight of command. Rain lashed the estate above, thunder rumbling like approaching convoys. He activated a console, fingers flying over encrypted keys, summoning reinforcements, no doubt, via discreet channels. "They want chaos. A staged fire at the docks to cover extraction here." His eyes met Sumin's, the bond tested. Would she stand with him or flee the rising tide? Sumin's hand found the burner in her pocket, deleted message or not, its weight a reminder of choices. Outside, the storm intensified, wind howling through vents like a warning. But deeper, a new sound, the faint scrape of metal upstairs, as if a door yielded too easily. Infiltration, or the environment turning traitor. A guard's voice burst over the intercom. "Perimeter breach, east gate down, they're inside." Hiroshi stood, drawing a concealed pistol with fluid grace, the code igniting in his stance. "Stay here." But Sumin rose too, heart pounding, loyalty pulling her forward, autonomy be damned. As alarms wailed faintly, the screen showed shadows moving through the garden. 3 figures, hooded, closing on the house. IK's men, racing the storm. Who had sold the biometric override, and could they hold the line before dawn's light exposed the betrayal? The safe room's steel door sealed with a resonant thud, but the alarms pierced through like relentless sirens, syncing with the storm's fury outside. Rain hammered the estate's roof in sheets, thunder cracking overhead as if the sky itself conspired with the intruders. Hiroshi moved with predatory economy, pistol gripped low and steady, his yukata sleeve slipping to reveal the intricate tattoos coiling up his forearm. Dragons inked from a life of restrained violence. Sumin stood frozen for a heartbeat, the air thick with the metallic bite of recycled oxygen and the faint, acrid whiff of ozone from the flickering wall screen. Shadows on the feed twisted unnaturally, 3 figures darting between lantern pools, hoods slick with rain, their paths calculated to evade the sweeping floodlights. One paused, raising what looked like a jammer, technology as mundane as a radio scanner, disrupting signals in bursts to blind the cameras. "Stay down," Hiroshi commanded again, his voice a whip crack over the din, but his eyes betrayed the conflict, possessiveness warring with the code that valued her autonomy even now. He glanced at Ji-un, who clutched a small antique dagger from her shawl, her face etched with the resolve of wars long past. "Obasan, the consul, lock the overrides." She nodded, fingers dancing over the keys with surprising dexterity. Her Korean murmurs a steady chant against the chaos, family first, no matter the cost. Sumin's mind raced, piecing the investigative threads amid the panic. The biometric override. Someone inside must have fed IK the print, a turncoat exploiting guard rotations, or a subtle behavioral tell, like the servant's odd glance at dinner. Her father's ledger debt flickered in her thoughts. Perhaps an old Yokohama contact, resurfacing through discreet channels, tying her unwitting face to this breach. She couldn't cower. Loyalty to her own survival and the budding trust in Hiroshi pushed her forward. Grabbing a heavy flashlight from the table, its beam cutting the dimness like a blade, she followed him to the door. "I'm not hiding. If they're after me, I need to know why." He shot her a look, sharp as shattered glass, but didn't argue. Time was the real enemy. The door hissed open, spilling them into the stairwell where emergency lights bathed the walls in crimson pulses. Footsteps echoed above, muffled by the storm but closing. The scrape of boots on tatami, a grunt as someone tripped a pressure mat. Hiroshi signaled silence, pistol raised, his free hand guiding her shoulder, protective, insistent, the touch igniting a spark amid the fear. They ascended in tandem, the air growing heavier with rain-scented drafts seeping through cracks, the estate's reinforced bones groaning under the gale. At the top, the corridor unfolded in shadows, Fusuma panels rattling like loose teeth. Hiroshi peered through a slit in the scroll painting, the garden visible in fractured glimpses. Intruders converging on the veranda, one fumbling with a lockpick on the outer doors, rain sluicing off his black jacket. The white van from the docks, its plate now clear in Sumin's memory, must have ferried them here, a diversion at the river masking the real strike. Thunder boomed and the lights stuttered again, plunging the hall into momentary black. In that void, a flashlight beam stabbed from the garden side, sweeping wildly before the generators surged back. Two on the east flank, one circling, Hiroshi whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "The jammer's short range. Our radios are down, but the patrols should converge." He tapped his ear, mimicking a call, but static greeted him. Human error or betrayal. The tampered manifests at the warehouse pointed to infiltration deep in the ranks. A compromised driver, perhaps, leaking convoy routes via burner phones. Sumin's grip tightened on the flashlight. Her ethics rebelled at the violence, but fear for Ji-un and the fragile life they'd shared tonight forged a reluctant alliance. "The ledger. Does it name my father directly? Or is this about Aiko's accident?" Hiroshi's jaw clenched, the scar pulling taut. "Both. Ichiro claims your old man owed on a shipment that crossed my wife's path. 5 years ago, the car bomb was meant for me. But she drove that day. They think using you twists the knife." His admission hung raw, vulnerability cracking his armor, possessiveness yielding to the truth that bound them, shared loss, echoes of family debts. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, pale not from ghosts, but the cost of vows kept under pressure. A crash shattered the tension, the veranda doors buckling inward, wood splintering under a ram's force. The lead intruder burst through, soaked and hulking, a silenced pistol glinting in his fist. Hiroshi fired first. The suppressed shot a sharp cough that dropped the man in a heap, but not before a wild return cracked the wall panel near Sumin's head, plaster dust blooming like smoke. She swung the flashlight instinctively, its heavy end connecting with a second figure lunging from the shadows. A guard. No, another hood, his nose crunching under the blow. He staggered, cursing in guttural Japanese. "The girl! Take her alive!" The third closed from the corridor's end, jamming the hall with a burst from an automatic, bullets chewing into the rice paper. Hiroshi shoved Su-min behind a lacquered screen, his body shielding hers as he returned fire, the acrid tang of cordite filling the air. Run to the safe room, Ji-yoon's waiting. But she didn't, autonomy fueled by adrenaline. She spotted the intruder's dropped phone on the floor, screen lit with a map of the estate. Access codes highlighted, a route to the safe room marked. Betrayal confirmed. An inside man had guided them. Perhaps the driver from the sedan, his scar a false flag. The storm peaked, wind howling through the breach like a beast unchained, rain flooding the veranda in rivulets that turned the tatami slick. Hiroshi tackled the third, a brutal grapple ending with a knee to the gut and a precise strike to the temple. No gore, just efficient neutralization, the code's restraint evident even in fury. Panting, he hauled Su-min up, blood trickling from a graze on his arm, staining the yukata crimson. They're routed, but more coming, convoys jammed by the blackout. Distant sirens wailed. Not police, but his reinforcements, navigating the flooded roads via satellite pings. Ji-yoon emerged from a side passage, dagger sheathed, her face ashen but unbroken. The old ledger's safe. Burn the page with your father's name. No more debts. Relief washed over Su-min, mingled with the push-pull of Hiroshi's gaze. He'd claimed her protection, but in the fight she'd chosen it too. As patrols swarmed the garden, cuffing the fallen, the rain eased to a patter, thunder retreating like a defeated foe. But in the intruder's phone, clutched in Su-min's hand, a final message blinked. Extraction failed. Phase 2, hospital, leverage the mother. IK's reach extended further than the estate, had they already compromised the Yokohama ward, turning her family into the true target? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The intruder's phone vibrated in Su-min's grip like a live wire. The screen's glow cutting through the veranda's pooling shadows as patrols dragged the hooded figures away. Their curses swallowed by the dying storm. Rain dripped from the eaves in erratic rhythms, mingling with the coppery scent of Hiroshi's bloodied arm and the sodden tatami's musty chill. The message, extraction failed. Phase 2, hospital, leverage the mother. Hung stark, IK's initials a signature of calculated malice. Hiroshi snatched the device, his face a mask of controlled fury. The scar along his jaw livid under the returning lanterns. They're not done. Yokohama ward, your mother's exposed. His voice was gravel over steel, the code igniting. Protect the innocents, no matter the personal toll. Su-min's world narrowed to that single threat. Autonomy, fracturing under the weight of fear, for the woman who'd raised her alone, tubes and monitors her only guardians. We go now, she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, the flashlight clattering to the floor. Ji-yoon stepped forward, her dagger vanishing into her shawl, eyes fierce with the legacy of border-crossing survivors. Take the back tunnel. Avoid the roads. I'll hold here, signal the convoy. She clasped Su-min's wrist, a grandmother's vow bridging bloodlines. Family isn't born, it's forged in the dark. Hiroshi nodded once, barking orders into a backup radio that crackled to life. Static-laced confirmations from outer guards, rerouting via discrete channels. No time for ambulances or police entanglements. His world ran on burner phones and shadowed logistics, human networks trumping institutional limits. He wrapped his graze in a torn yukata strip, the makeshift bandage staining dark, a visible cost of the night's defense. The sedans prepped, armored glass, reinforced chassis. But if they're ahead... He didn't finish, the implication clear. Rivals could jam exits or stage a blackout at the hospital, turning wards into traps. They slipped through the estate's underbelly again, the stairwell's concrete steps slick with seepage, the air heavy with the hum of generators and the faint drip of infiltrated rain. Emerging into a concealed garage beneath the hillside, the black sedan idled, exhaust curling like fog from the Sumida's banks. The driver, scarred veteran from earlier tales, revved the engine, eyes meeting Hiroshi's in the rear view. Routes clear to the expressway, but chatter on scanners. White van spotted near the bridge. Inagawakai plates, partial match to the dock manifests. Hiroshi slid into the passenger seat, pistol holstered but ready, while Sumin took the back, her fingers tracing the door's hidden panic latch, a detail he'd murmured during the drive-up. The garage door lifted with a hydraulic groan, spilling them onto a service road winding through pines. The storm's remnants lashing the windshield in sheets. Tires gripped wet asphalt, the sedan surging toward the city lights, twinkling like distant lures. Sumin's phone buzzed. The hospital's line. She answered, heart slamming. "Ms. Park? Your mother's agitated. Visitors asking questions, flashing badges that don't check out. Security's on it, but—" The line crackled. Jamming signal cutting through, a common tech ploy from black market scanners. "Hurry," she urged Hiroshi, suspicion yielding to trust. His code mirrored her own fierce protection, a bond tested in the rear view's fleeting glances. Traffic thinned on the expressway, the river below a black vein under sodium arcs, warehouses hulking along its edge like silent witnesses to old debts. But the white van materialized in the mirrors, aggressive, headlights flaring as it weaved closer, bumping the sedan's rear with deliberate force. The driver swerved, gravel spraying from the shoulder, the jolt sending Sumin forward against the seatbelt. "They're forcing us off," Hiroshi growled, unholstering as the van pulled alongside. Its passenger window rolling down to reveal a masked face leveling a submachine gun. Silenced bursts, pinging off armored panels, sparks dancing like fireflies. Hiroshi fired back through the cracked window, the shot shattering glass but missing, the van fishtailing in retaliation. The driver punched the accelerator, veering onto an industrial exit toward Yokohama's docks, familiar territory, but hazardous now, with rival factions controlling key manifests. "Shortcut through the tunnels," he barked, the sedan diving into an underpass lit by flickering halogens, the air turning dank with salt and diesel fumes. The van followed, relentless, its engine roaring in pursuit, but the narrow confines turned the chase claustrophobic, mirrors scraping concrete walls, headlights bouncing wildly. Sumin gripped the seat, piecing clues. IK's Phase 2 wasn't random. The tampered ledger had led them here, her father's unpaid shipment, a thread pulling at the hospital's seams. A behavioral tell from the visitors, perhaps a turncoat nurse bought with promises of easy money. The tunnel ended abruptly at a chain-link gate, the driver ramming through with a metallic screech, emerging onto dockside lots where cranes loomed, skeletal against the night. The van braked hard behind, but Hiroshi's radio crackled. "Convoy inbound, 2 minutes, hold the line." They skidded to a halt near a shipping office, floodlights buzzing overhead, the river's lap echoing like a countdown. The van's doors flew open, 3 figures spilling out, Ichiro Kato among them. Lean and sharp-featured, his sneer visible in the glare. "The ghost and the debt," he called, voice carrying over the wind, pistol raised. "Hand her over, Kato. The old woman's leverage ends tonight." Hiroshi stepped out, shielding Sumin, his stance unyielding. "The code says no innocence. Your grudge dies here." Shots exchanged in controlled bursts, ricocheting off container stacks, the air thick with powder and brine. The driver covered from the car, a graze clipping his shoulder, another cost, blood blooming on his sleeve. Sumin ducked behind a crate, spotting a loose manifest sheet, fluttering in the gust. Her father's name, crossed out beside Ichiro's, the debt fabricated to justify the hit on Aiko. Rage fueled her. She hurled a loose pipe, distracting one thug long enough for Hiroshi to disarm him with a precise tackle. The fight a blur of grapples and grunts, no excess violence, just survival's raw math. Sirens wailed as the convoy arrived, black SUVs screeching in, guards swarming with batons and zip ties. Ichiro bolted toward the river's edge, but a patrol netted him. The ledger's secrets unraveling in the scuffle, texts from a bribed hospital orderly confirming the setup. Victory came stained, Hiroshi's arm worsening, the driver's limp and Sumin's dress torn, but the threat shattered, organized malice exposed as human greed and old vendettas. By dawn, the Yokohama ward stood secure, reinforcements blending as family visitors. Sumin's mother slept peacefully, IVs steady, bills quietly settled through Hiroshi's channels, no strings, just the code extended. He stood at the window, bandaged and weary, his hand finding hers. "The treasure isn't power or payback," he murmured, eyes tracing the river's calm. "It's this, trust earned in the storm, family chosen over blood debts." She leaned into him. The resemblance a bridge, not a chain. Autonomy intact, but woven with loyalty's quiet strength. Gion arrived later, bearing tea and stories of past survivals, the three forming a circle against the world's edges. The adventure's scars lingered, injuries healing slow, alliances reforged with caution. But what endured was transformation, possession yielding to partnership, suspicion to shared memory. In the Yakuza's shadowed dance, they'd claimed something rarer than empires, a future pledged in whispers, outlasting the dock's fleeting tides. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.